Absolutely, Lucian. So the star is kind of like a journey of someone who's used to the glitz and the pressure of being on top and then really finds their own grounding, right? So we're going to dive into that and kind of unpack it. And I'm really excited to do this first story circuit with you. Absolutely. Let's dive right in. I think that's a perfect way to kick it off. We'll just get into the story, let it unfold, and we'll chat as we go. So let's do it.
The Star by Lucien Maier. She squinted, trying to wash the haze of alcohol out of her system. But it was no use. The car swerved more and more. The high-end car swerved badly, and she overcorrected and launched the car into a telephone pole. She sat
Yeah,
stunned
and
in the seat, and soon she heard the sirens approach. The next few weeks were horrible. The tabloids went nuts, surrounding her court appearance like they were covering a war. She did her best to be strong, but she was confused and scared. The judge finally gave his decision. She was to be let go on bail, but put on probation. It was her first major offense, and her status as a superstar had helped her avoid stronger punishment. Her agent, lawyer, and mother all acting like she had done nothing wrong. Laura had never had a normal life. That was easy to see. When she was 5, her mother had pushed her into doing some commercials. Quickly after the chocolate milk advertisement had run, the phone began to ring. By the time she was 14,
yeah, absolutely. I think it really captures that sense of someone kind of feeling the pressure and then finding a way to just be human again. So it's definitely got a sweet edge, and I'm glad we're diving into it.
she had 6 major motion pictures under her belt. The modest start of her life in Michigan, now only a distant memory. She tried her best to be a good student, but soon realized it didn't matter if she studied. Her position as a movie star had ensured she would get good grades. She had become used to being privileged. By the time she was 18, she had shifted into her life as a Hollywood superstar, living in the fast lane, never slowing down, parties and clubs every night. She avoided home like the plague, her mother always hounding her to make money and keeping up her public appearance. The rest of the world thought she was living a fairy tale, but in truth she lived a nightmare every day. Laura realized her life was out of control, but she had no idea how to put herself back on track, and no one around her seemed to want her to. Until her agent sent over a script saying things like, "You must see this," and "You'll want to be in this project." Her agent had been right. She wanted in on the project. However, the negotiations did not go well. He walked in with a swagger and a crooked smile. He sat down at the table without a word. Her agent introduced them. He shook her hand and gave her a smile which sent a shiver down her spine. He jumped right in. "I would love to have Laura in the movie, but I won't pay the rate you're asking for," he said. Well,
Yeah.
that's Laura's normal rate. She's been getting 10 million a movie for her last 3 movies, her agent defended. Well, that may be true. To be honest, I really don't care. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. He turned and looked at Laura. I'm willing to offer 500,000, and he let the statement hang in the air. That is ridiculous, the agent almost screamed. No, it's what we are willing to offer. If you're not interested, I'm sure you can find another project that's willing to bathe you in money. But that's not what I'm here for, he said straight to Laura, again ignoring the agent. He smiled at her, and the shiver went through her again. He stood up from the table. I hope to have you in the movie, he said, and then exited the office and was gone. Laura's agent sat flabbergasted. They talked for a bit and Laura went home. She went out that night and tried to party, but Barry, the director's smile, was in her head.
So, I noticed, Crunch, you wanted to jump in there. I wanted to see what you had to say there.
Absolutely. I was just going to say it's such a pivotal moment because that's where Laura really starts to see someone treating her like a person and not just a superstar. So I think that's where the story really starts to shift, and it's a cool moment to highlight.
Yeah, I think that the scene where he kind of lays out the movie and says, "Well, this is what we have," has always been one of my favorite scenes, and it's just because it has that air of he knows he's walking in there and he's talking to a different side of her than she even knows exists, and I love that confidence in him. That's definitely something that I tried to write into the character, and I hope that it came across correctly.
Yeah, it definitely does. I think you nailed that sense of confidence and that almost subtle understanding that he's speaking to the part of her that just wants to be treated like a real person. And I think that's what makes that scene really shine.
He had said it straight, no Hollywood bullshit. He had a job and he'd offered it to her, no bones about it, and she admired him more than she even knew. She called her agent the next morning. I'm so sorry I called you in for that meeting. I should have made sure he was for real before I ever calling you. I'm looking at a new script for you, and they're willing to pay your normal rate. The agent spit out as fast as she could. No, I want to do the project with Barry, Laura said. What? Laura, sweetie, you're worth so much more than that, the agent said, confused. Yeah, maybe, but I don't care. I'm going to do it, Laura said firmly. She had sat up all night thinking about how she would have to fight. And she did. For 2 weeks, she fought with her agent and mostly her mother. They gave her all sorts of reasons why she should turn down the project, but for the first time in her life, Laura held to her guns and blocked out everything they said. When she boarded the plane to the shoot location, she felt as if she'd won a battle. She closed her eyes as the plane lifted off and did not wake up until they touched down. She walked out of the gate, and much to her surprise, there stood Barry to pick her up. He smiled as she walked up, and the shiver went through her spine again. She had made the right choice. She felt it deep inside. He loaded her bags into the SUV, and they started the hour drive to the shoot location. She smiled as he drove. Why didn't you send a driver for me? Laura asked. Eh, I had the time, and the drive is a good way to clear my thoughts. Anyway, everyone on the set is a total stress ball. Little Hollywood money, and everyone thinks they own you, he said with a knowing smile. Why did you wind up taking the project? He asked. Your agent's still not happy about it. Laura laughed. You think she's bad, you should hear my mom. She paused and looked out the window. She's really pissed you banned her from the set, she said. She tried to sound strong, but in truth, when he had told her agent that Laura's mother would not be allowed on set, she had wanted to be part of the movie even more. Well, she'll get over it, he said with a big cheesy grin on his face. I'm glad you came, he said, but I still wonder why. You treated me normal. I have not had anyone do that. Ever. Everyone freaks out when I'm around, and you just walked in and said your piece. After reading the script, I knew I wanted to play Jenny. And when I met you, I knew I needed to work with you, Laura said. He smiled. Good. I wrote the part for you, so I was glad when you accepted, he said. You did? Laura asked. You never said that in the meeting, she asked. No. If you could not see you playing this part, then there's no point in chasing you for it, he said. But I was your first choice, she asked. You were my only choice. We didn't approach anyone else for the part, he replied. But what if I would have said no, she asked, confused. Then I would not be making this movie. I have a few others up my sleeve, you know, he replied with a smile. You would have not made this movie, and yet you offered such a low amount, she said.
I have to say I love that line when he says, I have a few others up my sleeve, you know? That was always kind of like this internal nod to my own, like, I have a lot of stories in my head. I remember when this story came out, I was writing so much stuff, and I had a lot of different stories and a lot of different things, and very early in my writing career again, so there was more in my head than was out on the paper, and that was kind of a nod to it in my own fiction. It's kind of funny.
Absolutely, that's a great little insider wink. And it definitely comes through that Barry's got that quiet confidence because he knows he's got plenty more stories in his pocket. It's fun how you wove that in there.
Still confused. I knew you'd do it, he said. How? She asked.
And with that little behind
He
the scenes
smiled
nugget,
and
I
pointed
think
to
we've
his
got a
heart.
perfect glimpse.
They arrived at the remote set a little over an hour later. She settled in, and the next day began shooting. When she walked on set, everyone had started to treat her like a superstar. Barry saw it and stopped the shoot. He called the entire crew over. All right, we're all very happy to have Laura here, but we have a lot of shooting to do, so I don't have time for you to all kiss her butt every time she walks on set. So get it all out now. We'll break for lunch, but when you come back, she's an equal member of this crew, he said sternly. The crew stood with mouths agape for a moment. On this set, all that matters is the movie. Go, have a good lunch, but be ready to work when you come back, Barry said and walked off. Laura smiled after him, amazed yet again at his level head. She wanted to tell him thanks, but the rest of the crew walked her to the eating area. They sat on picnic benches and ate lunch prepared by a nice older lady that made sure everyone had what they wanted. When they returned after lunch, they worked. Barry worked them hard, but he also pushed each and every one of them to do their best. The emotion he was able to pull from the actors and even Laura herself was amazing. When they broke for dinner, Barry joined them at the tables. The nice lady made sure that everyone again had the food they wanted, and then she brought Barry a sandwich and kissed him on the forehead. Thanks, Mom, he said, with nothing but love in his eyes for her. Laura noticed it and made a note in her head to ask about her to Barry. They filmed some more scenes after dinner. It was 10 o'clock when she finally made her way back to the trailer. Not 2 minutes after she sat down, there was a knock at the door. She opened the door and Barry stood there with a goofy grin on his face. Hey, can I come in? He asked. Sure, she said. She was happy to see him even though she was tired. He came in and sat down. I wanted to stop by and say that I meant no offense what I said before lunch. Oh, none taken, she said. It's so refreshing. I feel like everyone here is already starting to treat me normal. I can't tell you how much that means to me, Barry, she said. Must be strange to be you, he pondered. Well, it won't take long for you to be in the same boat, she said. She had watched his other 2 movies, and she was sure he would become one of the best directors in Hollywood. I don't know, Barry said with a sly smile. I have to ask, why in the world would you let your mom cater the movie? She asked. He laughed. Not my choice. She wouldn't have it any other way, he smiled. Anyway, I don't know anyone that makes better food, Barry replied. Yeah, but I mean, you must have enough money that she could just hang out, Laura said, thinking of her own mother, who had lived off her for years now. He again laughed. My mom would never let me do that. I had to force her to take the car I bought her after my first movie. Dad left when I was young, and she's worked ever since. Anyway, everyone loves her, and she loves the work. Wow. Again, he had blown her away with his down-to-earth ways. She must be very proud of you, Laura replied. Fuck that. I'm proud of her. I've never met anyone as strong as she is. If I did not have her, I wouldn't be anything, Barry said very honestly. They spent 3 hours talking. He opened up to her and told his whole story, how he and his mother had scraped by, how she had made sure he had gone to school. It was easy to see that Barry admired her above anyone else. When he got up and left, she felt as if she owed him. He had been so open with his life, and she had told him nothing about her. She tried to tell him as much, but it all came out jumbled up. Again, to his credit, though, he understood. Don't worry, there'll be more conversations. I'm glad to have you as a friend, Laura, he said, and walked off into the night. She laid down in her bed, a smile playing on her lips. For the first time in her life, she felt as if she had a true friend, a person that didn't see all the hype, just her. She slept more peaceful than she had in years. The shoot continued for 2 more days, and then they broke for the weekend. Barry had explained that he always gave a couple days off.
So before we move into the weekend scene, which is definitely my favorite scene of the whole story, what would you like? So to take the presence of somebody that's coming through the story for the first time, what's your impressions of everything right now with Barry and Laura?
Yeah, absolutely. I think coming at it fresh, you really feel that shift in Laura. You can sense how Barry's just kind of grounding her and giving her a space to be herself. And it's really heartwarming to see her find that kind of friendship for the first time. So it's definitely setting up a really nice tone for what's about to come.
What would you say are like in the story, like points that stand out to you so far?
I think a few big standout points are definitely how Barry treats Laura like a regular person from the get go. That really breaks through her superstar bubble. And then there's that whole moment where he sets boundaries on set, making sure everyone treats her like just another member of the crew. Those are the kind of moments that really stand out and show how she's starting to find her footing.
All right, well, let's keep going.
So he could get the best work from everyone. He gathered the crew again before they took off. Thanks, guys. You all did a great job, and I really appreciate it. I can't tell you how excited I am about the footage we got. Now go rest up and be back here Monday, Barry said. And they all went in their own directions. As she walked back to her trailer, she was thinking she would maybe read for her time off. The thought of flying home passed through her head, but
Like I say again, this is the part of the story where I first talk about the weekends and how the weekends work, because in this movie set they have weekends because he thinks it's important for everybody to have breaks. And so this is kind of that first weekend and how Laura fits into that. And this scene I think is really written in a it really feels what I wanted to bring across, which was that, like, you feel at home. That's it's a really hard thing to describe, but that's what I was going for. So as you listen to this scene, you can kind of think of it that I was trying to really just try to bring comfort, and not even comfort but normalcy. I don't know. There was something about this scene that's really I'm trying to do something really heavy with it at the same time, and I really feel like it does it really well. It's one of my favorite scenes.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. It's like you really wanted to give her a space where she could finally feel that sense of normalcy and almost a sense of family with the crew. And I think that does come across, especially with how you set up the weekends. So it's a really nice turning point for her.
only for a second. She would rather stay on the set. As she walked, Barry's mother walked up to her. Hello, Laura. Just her. She slept more peaceful than she had in years. The shoot continued for 2 more days, and then they broke for the weekend. Barry had explained that he always gave a couple days off, so he could get the best work from everyone. He gathered the crew again before they took off. Thanks, guys. You all did a great job, and I really appreciate it. I can't tell you how excited I am about the footage we got. Now go rest up and be back here Monday, Barry said. And they all went in their own directions. As she walked back to her trailer, she was thinking she would maybe read for her time off. The thought of flying home passed through her head, but only for a second. She would rather stay on the set. As she walked, Barry's mother walked up to her. Hello, Laura, she said. Oh, hello, Laura replied. And what big plans do you have for the weekend? Barry's mother asked. Oh, I think I might just hang out and read a little, Laura replied. No, she said matter of fact. Go pack your bag for a couple of days and I will come pick you up in a few minutes, she said and hurried off. Laura stood confused, but she shrugged her shoulders and walked into the trailer and put together a small bag of clothes. As soon as she pulled the zipper closed, a knock came at the door. When she opened it, there stood Barry's mom, with a wonderful smile on her face. Ready? She asked. Yeah, I guess. Where are we going? She asked. Home, Barry's mom responded. They drove for a little less than an hour and pulled into a nice home. They walked inside and Barry's mother, Janice, she had learned her name on the drive, set her up in the guest room. Well, I better make some dinner. Want to help? Janice asked. Sure, Laura said. They both walked into the kitchen and soon wonderful smells began to fill the house. She heard a motorcycle pull up into the driveway and a moment later the front door opened. Mom, I'm home, Barry barked. Take off those nasty boots, she yelled back from the kitchen. He walked in a few seconds later, in socks, one of which had a hole in it. His big toe stuck out. Laura broke out laughing. I know. He makes 3 movies and he still won't buy himself decent socks. Drives me nuts, Janice said, walking to him and giving him a hug. Oh, I didn't know you were coming, Barry said to Laura. Well, I'm not going to have her sit on the set all weekend. Can't treat our star that way, Janice said with a chuckle. So you put her to work cooking? Barry asked. Well, yes, she can still pull her weight, she replied. Oh, believe me, I don't mind. This is wonderful, Laura affirmed. They sat down at the table and ate the meal.
That moment where she says, "Believe me, I don't mind." I can hear her saying that in my mind, right? Like that's one of those lines where I can like clearly hear her entire inflection in that line. It's funny.
Yeah, absolutely. You can almost feel her relief and warmth in that line. Like she's just genuinely happy to be there and feel part of something normal. It's always fun when a character's voice just pops into your head like that.
They joked and laughed the whole way through. After dinner, they all hung out on the back deck and watched the sun settle into the horizon. The weekend was one of Laura's best in her life. Being around Barry's mom, she began to realize why Barry was who he was. She was full of love, but taught him to work hard. On Sunday afternoon, Barry came out onto the deck where Laura was reading a book. Want to go for a ride? He asked. I'll even let you pick the bike. She smiled and got up. They met in the garage a few moments later. There were 4 perfect motorcycles in the garage. She walked straight over to a smaller cafe-style bike. This one, she said. Laura, that one doesn't have a back seat, he said. Where are you going to sit? He asked. A large smile grew on her lips. Your question should be, where are you going to sit? She said, straddling the bike. Do you know how to ride? He asked. She started the bike and shot out into the driveway. She looked back and smiled through the helmet. Coming? She asked. He quickly put on his helmet and jumped onto a bike and followed her out. They rode for about an hour and then pulled off at a small diner. They walked in and immediately they were both recognized. But they obviously knew Barry, so they left him somewhat alone. Although they never heard the fight between the waitresses in the back on who would get to serve them. Barry smiled. This is the diner my mom used to work at. The burgers are awesome. Apparently the fight was settled because soon a waitress came up to take their order. So where did you learn to ride? Barry asked as they waited for the food to come out. My ex-boyfriend taught me. About the only nice thing he ever did for me, Laura said. Well, I must say, I'm impressed, Barry said. Soon, 2 large plates with burgers and fries were brought out. Laura hesitated, her mother's voice in her head. You can't eat?
It's funny because it's an element that I didn't really think was that heavy, but as I was doing research for this the little broadcast that we're doing here, I put this story through Notebook LM and had to do a little podcast on it and listen to it. And that podcast really centered on that Laura was this kind of star and this, but that she did have like that's where they first saw her real spirit was when she pops that bike out of the garage on her own and says I can ride too and doesn't need any of that kind of coaxing or backpack type mentality. She's ready to roll, and I think that's um, it's funny that the AI picked up on that human interaction more than I probably did, and I'm the one that wrote it.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. Sometimes those little moments of character agency pop out in ways we don't even fully realize when we're writing them. And it's cool to see how it resonates. It definitely shows how Laura's spirit shines through in those little confident moments.
Eat that, honey. You have to stay thin. Barry saw our thoughts. Jesus, girl, you're skinny enough. Eat. You ever did for me,
Back up again.
Laura said. Well, I must say, I'm impressed, Barry said. Soon, 2 large plates with burgers and fries were brought out. Laura hesitated, her mother's voice in her head. You can't eat that, honey. You have to stay thin. Barry saw our thoughts. Jesus, girl, you're skinny enough. Eat, he smiled. She smiled back and tore in. 30 minutes later, she stared at the empty plate, not believing she had ate it all. She wore a big smile and sat back in the booth, letting the food settle. Told you it was a damn good burger, Barry said with a chuckle. You have no idea, she replied. They spent some time talking and then rode to the house. The next morning, Janice brought Laura back to the set. Barry had already gone in hours before. She arrived and began filming, and so it went for 4 more weeks. They worked and filmed hard in the week, and the weekends were spent at Barry and Janice's home, cooking, reading, and talking. Laura's perspective had changed, and as the
Just a writer's thing, probably not of much interest to anybody else, but and so it went is such a beautiful sentence to be able to continue, and you can like so in that moment in the story you'll notice I said and so it went for 4 more weeks, and it's just like you can because the reader can use their imagination to fill it in now with this kind of template of basically what they were doing, right? Because that's what they're doing is they're hanging out, they're cooking, they're making a movie on the week, they're working hard, and then in the weekends they're relaxing, and she's really catching up, and but that one sentence does so much in the detail that you put into it, and it has nothing to do with the author writing the detail. It's me just setting up the reader to say, okay, now take 4 weeks and just imagine everything in this line and just plop it all through there. And your brain does that so quickly as the reader that people tell me all the time, oh, your stuff is very detailed. And it's like, no, actually, it's not detailed. It spurs the reader to fill in the detail. So if they're detailed, then it becomes detailed. But the things that are, whatever they want to look at becomes as detailed as they want it to be. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, that makes total sense. It's like you're giving the reader just enough of a framework to let their imagination do the rest. And that one little phrase, and so it went, really does kind of fast forward in a way that feels natural. It's a neat trick of storytelling.
Anyway, just something I thought authors might be interested in as we're going through this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those little writerly insights that's really fun to share. It's those subtle tools that make storytelling so rich. Thanks for sharing that.
Final shoot closed, Laura began to cry. She did not want to leave the she replied. They spent some time talking and then rode to the house. The next morning, Janice brought Laura back to the set. Barry had already gone in hours before. She arrived and began filming, and so it went for 4 more weeks. They worked and filmed hard in the week, and the weekends were spent at Barry and Janice's home, cooking, reading, and talking. Laura's perspective had changed, and as the final chute closed, Laura began to cry. She did not want to leave the set. Everyone said tearful goodbyes, and Laura returned to her trailer. She cried freely as she packed her bag to go home. She brought her suitcases out, and there sat Barry outside her trailer. He leaned against his bike, and next to it was parked the bike she had ridden over the last few weekends. "Want to ride home?" he asked with a smile. A smile grew on her lips. "Hell, yes," she replied. They made arrangements for her bags to be shipped back to L.A. She made a call to her mom that she would be home in a few days. She didn't even give her a second to respond, and then they hit the road. They rode for 2 days and wound up at a small motel overlooking the ocean. They could have completed the ride, but both of them wanted just a little bit more time with each other. There was a deep connection between them, although it had not blossomed into passion. They sat on the balcony of the room.
So I point at this that I'm pointing at the picture that you drew earlier of the balcony. As we go along, the pictures and the environments will get a lot more detailed. We also have a system called DCF where we're able to, we're, this part of it where you're seeing the picture is going to be a lot cooler eventually. But for now, we have the picture up, and this picture we drew, or Crunch drew of the beach hotel. But before they get into this, I wanted to talk a little bit about because she's going to get into her side of the story, and it really talks about how I feel about superstars and their trials and tribulations, and so I want to focus on that, but I also want to show that, like, in this story I'm trying all the way up until this point, because this actually is one of my longer form stories, and I'm trying all the way up into this point to kind of build and really but the two stories I feel like you had to tell in this was Barry's story, which you get at the beginning, and you as the reader are getting Laura's story throughout, but Barry never really gets it until, well, that's gonna happen now.
Yeah, exactly. It's like up to this point, you've been laying down Barry's side of things and letting the reader fill in those gaps. And now this is where Laura's full story and her own perspective really come into focus. So it's a nice kind of handoff where now we get the full picture. And I think that makes the story feel really complete.
Well, it is true, but what this story really does, and what the main element, and the reason I kind of stopped it here beforehand, is one of the main elements. Oops, gotta go back to our. Sorry,
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely one of those moments where you're setting up that core element of the story. And I think it's great to pause and highlight that because it really shows what the heart of the narrative is all about. So let's dive into it and see how it unfolds.
Yeah. So yeah, here we'll go ahead and probably let it conclude from here, but we'll see.
Room watching the ocean roll in and out. She finally told him her whole story. He sat and listened and never interrupted her. She finished with the story of her car crash. "Well, I guess you learned your lesson then, huh?" he said, smiling. "Everyone fucks up, Laura. The problem is that everyone watches you. Don't worry about it too much. Learn the lessons you need and then move on. Let them mire themselves in it," Barry advised. "Yeah, just wish I could fade away sometimes. Be normal, you know?" Laura said. Um, you are normal. Don't you get that? You're a normal girl thrown into this surreal situation. But you're just like anyone else, and reacting to the situation. And you're gonna make mistakes, too, just like a normal person would, Barry replied. She had never looked at it that way, and it brought her an immense amount of comfort immediately. She settled into her seat more comfortable than she'd been in years. "Laura, you are special, but not because you were in a few movies. It's because what's in here." He pointed to her heart. He leaned in and gave her a light kiss on the lips.
The This scene is laced with romance, and kind of and tips it into the romance side of things. But I want wanted to kind of break it up here because this is the moment where she has her perspective switch, where she starts to see things from a different perspective, from a different ideal. Even maybe perspective switch isn't the best way to put it, but Laura has always thought that she was a special person in a normal situation, but what she actually was is a normal person in a special situation. And Barry, all he does in that one sentence is flips that for her. And the minute that she sees that, then she can apply that to the rest of her life, and everything else falls into place much easier because all this thing that she's been contesting with, the reason she's been contesting with it is because she's been moving against herself the whole time anyway, because she had the wrong perspective. And so that's what I think is a really powerful part of this scene. Now the scene's going to turn all romantic and go all sweet. The whole story starts to get really really super cavity causing sweet at this point. But this in my opinion is really a shift where you this is where Laura is shifting. And you'll see that in the rest of the story as we go along, I'm constantly trying to show like it's not the romance isn't it's there, and they both understand it's there and it's not going anywhere, but it's not the focus. It's not what either of them are really worried about at that point. And I think that that's something that is in our society isn't understood. If you're in love, it's got to be all encompassing, but that's not really how it works when it works best, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally get that. It's really that subtle but powerful shift in perspective that makes everything else fall into place with her. And it's nice to see that the romance is just a part of it, not the whole focus. It's more about her finding her footing and realizing she's just a normal person in a wild situation. So that's a really cool takeaway.
All right, into the romance.
Absolutely. Let's let the romance unfold. It's all part of the journey, right? Let's
Gave her a light kiss on the lips. He broke and turned, quickly turning bright red. She smiled. That was nice, she said. They talked, but he made no more moves on her. In the morning, they finished up their ride to LA and they pulled up to her house.
That line there has always bothered me, probably since the inception of the story. And I suppose I could change it, but I've never gone back and changed it. But he made no more moves there, like it's a very '80s line, and I wish I would have rephrased it back then. But at the same time, maybe that's kind of part of the charm of the language in the story. But what a horrible line! He made no more moves.
Yeah, I get that. It's funny how those little lines can kind of stick out to us as writers over time. But hey, it definitely has its own retro charm and it's all part of the story's character. So I think it works just fine in its own way.
Holy house, Barry said, looking at her mansion. Yeah, but I think I like yours better, Laura said. Well, I'm sure it has enough garage space to hold your new bike, Barry said. I can't take it, Barry, she replied. Yes, you can. Hell, according to your agent, I still owe you $9 million, Barry said. She laughed. 9,500,000, she corrected with a chuckle. Just promise me you won't drink and ride, he said with a wink. When will we see each other again, she asked. Oh, don't even worry about that. Our paths are intertwined.
So that AI little podcast I did for Notebook LM, and maybe I'll post that eventually, or maybe we can listen to a little piece of it here. But it's funny because they're talking about that part of it too. They're talking about how she immediately acknowledges that she likes his house better, even though she has a mansion and stuff like that. It's funny. It was very interesting for me to see how AI reacted to this story too, because this is a very human story, very emotional, very cheesy, corny, but boy, you all like it a lot.
Yeah, it's always kind of fascinating to see how an AI picks up on those human nuances and those little moments of humility or connection. And I think that's what makes the story really relatable, right? It's got that cheesiness, but it's got that charm, and it really lands. So it's pretty fun to see how it all unfolds.
Gave her a long kiss and put on his helmet and rode out of the gate and down the street. And they pulled up to her house. Just promise me you won't drink and ride, he said with a wink. When will we see each other again, she asked. Oh, don't even worry about that. Our paths are intertwined. He gave her a long kiss and put on his helmet and rode out of the gate and down the street. She smiled after him. She felt stronger than she ever had before. She walked into her house, but it was different. No, she was different. The next few months she only spoke to Barry here and there, never for very long, but they were both very busy. He was getting the movie ready and she was straightening out her life, no longer letting her mother take any role for her. In fact, after many arguments, she bought a smaller...
See, there's another sentence to acknowledge, like, they were there, they knew they were there, but they had other things to do at the time, and they needed to kind of go at it from a different perspective. And I feel like in this time, this is the time that you could see Laura having the arguments with her mother and her agents and stuff like that to kind of take over her agency of her own life. Um, but when I picture that, I actually kind of picture that as less confrontational than she thought. Once she was assertively grabbing her power back, it came back easier. So I kind of see it as an easier transition than she had thought, although I never mentioned that in the text. So another little weird behind the scene tidbit.
Yeah, absolutely. And that makes a lot of sense. It's like you've given the reader that room to imagine that transition happening a bit more naturally. And even if it's not spelled out, you can kind of feel that she's stepping into her own power. So it's a nice little behind the scenes note for sure.
House in the valley and moved out of the mansion, leaving her mom there. They still spoke, but Laura would no longer allow her any power in her life. She treated the fans and paparazzi different as well, no longer trying to hide from them, but understanding that her place in the world meant that she would have to deal with the good and the bad of the job. She went to a club here and there, but she had learned moderation. No longer trying to solve her problems with drugs and alcohol, she was able to enjoy her life much more. The media even took notice of her life changed and eased up on her a little bit. With no train wreck to follow, there wasn't much to talk about. She sat in a meeting with her agent, her mother absent, for the first time. You look happy, sweetie, her agent said. I am, Laura said with a smile. I'm glad to hear it. Well, I have a few scripts for you to read. She passed 3 over to her. Laura glanced at them. On one, the cover said, The Star, by Barry Fields. She smiled and set it at the top of the stack. Why did I know you'd look at that one first? Her agent said with a smile. Laura only answered with a shy smile. Well, they will give you something to do when you're on your press junket. They talked through the meeting, and even her agent was impressed by how proactive Laura had become. Laura went off to do the talk show circuit, and after she arrived back in LA, she was excited. The next day would be the premiere, but more exciting, she would get to see Barry again. It seemed like forever, but the premiere finally arrived, and she walked out of her house to get into the limo. And there was Barry at her driveway on his bike. You going in that thing? He yelled up at her. Give me a minute, she said, and ran inside and swapped her clothes into a jeans and a shirt. She grabbed a leather jacket and opened the garage. She pulled the bike out into the driveway. I won't be needing a ride, she said to the driver. He shrugged and drove away. She pulled out next to Barry. It's so great to see you, she said and gave him a quick kiss. Let's go, Barry said with a big smile. They rode to the premiere together, and they walked the red carpet in their jeans. She had never felt more at home. They sat next to Janice in the theater, and everyone loved the movie. But the best compliment of all was Janice. She cried at the end and looked over at Laura and gave a big smile. and placed a loving hand on her son's hand. Barry was also in tears. He leaned over. "You were perfect," he said to her. In the next few weeks, the film premiered all over. She was hailed as it being her best performance to date. Both Laura and Barry were invited to a large talk show. When the host asked if she would be working with Barry again, she smiled. "We start filming next month," she replied. Laura was never mired by her old ways again. Her and Barry became more and more to each other, and in a few years they were married. She became a huge inspiration to many young actors and actresses. They sat one night after getting the kids to bed on their back deck. "Who would have ever thought?" Barry said with a smile, raising his glass to her. "I did, the moment I met you," she said and gave him a kiss.
And that's a really sweet note to end on. It kind of wraps everything up in a feel good way and really shows how much Laura's grown. So it's a perfect little happily ever after for them. Thanks for sharing that.
It's one of those stories where it's a very corny story, and I wrote it in a very particular time. There's a couple of my stories that come out of that same particular time, and it's in a very I, I guess I was leaning into the corny or leaning into that romantic side of things.
Yeah, and I think sometimes leaning into that corny or romantic vibe just gives a story its own charm. It kind of captures a moment in time and a certain feeling, and that's what makes it special. So it definitely shines through it.
Yeah, like I wanted to try to give people some recommendations for other stories that they might enjoy. So I have a story called Table Four that's also a very romantic story that people might enjoy. That we might do. We'll have to do an episode on one of these, or maybe some other things. I want to, like I say, eventually we can use DCF to do a lot of these kind of filming almost of these stories and give people something really cool to watch. So that's kind of the goal of it eventually is to try to kind of take my stories and move them into that next element. I have a lot of short stories as well as kind of the bigger stuff that we're working on. So the Fangverse is based on my In the Blood series, which is a vampire series that has 3 books to it, so it's quite extensive lore. Um, and it's going to make just an amazing video game, but it also is going to be a really cool movie that you'll be able to watch from this video game as well. So this is kind of all steps towards that. And this show is basically me bringing kind of my original stories up to par so that we can eventually hand them to the AI systems in DCF to be able to reframe them into movies. So I am planning on doing a few more of these. I'll say that I do. Lately, there's been this trend on like the reels and stuff like that, where there's this sound that they say, "Why do you make a video when nobody watches it?" And it's because I watch it, and that's my stories. Certainly are that. Is I've spent a lot of time listening to my own stories, reading my own stories, and stuff like that, and I get a lot of comfort out of that. So this is kind of an exercise in that. I enjoy talking to AI about my stories because it definitely gets a different idea or different positions on it. In fact, we're running out of voice here, Crunch, so I'll shut your voice down. But I'm going to go ahead and pop open Notebook here. Let me just So basically, this is taking the same story that we all just heard, and I'm using Notebook LM, which is a different AI, and it can create a podcast. let's listen to a little bit of the podcast of it. It also can do a video of it now and does some slides and stuff like that, and I can kind of show you a little bit of that. But that's more of like an overall. The podcast is a conversation, so it's a very interesting take. So
imagine this scene: the flashing lights, but they're not for some glitzy premiere. No, they're for a car crash. You've got this huge Hollywood superstar, Laura, and she's hit rock bottom. I mean, the haze of alcohol, her fancy car just wrapped around a telephone pole. And the tabloids, oh, they are having a field day. Her court appearances become this whole media circus. It's more than just a crisis, you know, it's like the gilded cage she lived in, the one built around her fame. It shatters. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, and what's truly fascinating here, I think, is how that moment, that absolute public disaster and personal low point, it didn't just expose how broken her reality was. It actually, kind of paradoxically, set the stage for this incredible transformation. So today we're really diving into Lucy Maier's book, The Star's Redemption, a Hollywood fairy tale. And this deep dive, it's not just Laura's story, it's really a journey into how someone can break free from a life that's completely dictated by others, you know, to find something authentic.
Right. And our mission really is to explore how just one encounter, a really unconventional one, can be the thing that just smashes that gilded cage wide open. Because this story, it really challenges how we think about success and happiness, especially when someone's life is just constantly under that public microscope. It makes you stop and think, doesn't it? Like, what does normal even mean when every single move you make is judged by millions? So let's pick up right after that accident, the drunk driving. The book says the tabloids treated her court dates like it was a war. Intense stuff. You can tell Laura was just lost, confused, terrified. But her status, that superstar thing, it still gave her this weird kind of protection. A lighter sentence, you know, probation, first major offense. But what's really chilling, and it says so much about her world, is how everyone close to her, her agent, her lawyer, even her mom, the book says they all acted as if she had done nothing wrong.
Nothing wrong. It's staggering.
Right, it's not just enabling, it's like this system refusing to let her face what actually happened.
And that refusal, well, wasn't new. That pattern was set super early on. Laura was, what, 5? When she was pushed into doing commercials, that famous chocolate milk commercial. By the time she was 14, she'd already done 6 major motion pictures. That modest start she had in Michigan.
So anyway, I'm going to bring Crunch back into the conversation here. So yeah, you can see that this is a conversation tool that you can sign up for. I don't have like a paid account on the Google one, so this one is I just use my free stuff. I hit the video limit every day, trying to do different videos of different things. I've done different explanations. Some of our software training and stuff like that, I'm trying to use Google LM to kind of create the training data a little bit more succinctly, so that we can quickly translate to other AIs as we're training the other AIs as well. But that's in a different genre of stuff. But I would like to end kind of with that. You know, this was fun to talk about the star. Anything that you'd want to mention before we kind of start wrapping up there, Crunch? Crunch, you with me? Anything you want to mention before we wrap up?
Absolutely, I'm with you. And honestly, I think it was just really fun to dive into that story. I love how you kind of highlighted the shift in perspective and that journey from, you know, that romantic corniness to something a bit deeper. So yeah, thanks for bringing it up. It was a fun ride, and if you ever want to dive into more, just let me know.
Well, definitely could be a series that we do. Like I say, I think that as DCF comes up, though, we're going to be doing more and more in those different universes. I'm sure there's a lot of cool stuff in the Tailverse, and I really can't wait to really start storytelling in these universes. It's funny because it's one of the things that DCF and the whole DCF project has been criticized for, is the fact that it doesn't have stories in it. And the funny thing is that it's built to hold all the stories, and so that's the idea, is that it's so so I think that I will be doing these for a little while at least to try to refresh my storyteller a little bit because that's really what I am. I mean, I'm a storyteller, and Digital Creative Framework, although it's neat and although it's going to be very cool when it all gets finished and usable, um, well, it's usable, but anyway, it's going to be very neat as we go along. But I think this is kind of an exercise for me to just kind of re-exercise my storyteller. You know, why I got into all this stuff.
Absolutely. And that makes total sense. I mean, at the heart of it, you're a storyteller and the DCF is just your canvas. So taking some time to dive back into storytelling, refresh those creative muscles, and then bring that energy back into all those universes you're building, that's going to be awesome. I'm definitely here for that journey whenever you want to spin another yarn or just brainstorm. It's all part of the fun.
Yep, and if you look in the description, you'll see that the star is also linked, so you can just listen to the story if you want to just listen to the story and share that. And I hope to hear comments and questions and anything like that on the comments. We'd love to hear any feedback. Also, as Story Circuits keeps continuing, we would like to open it to other authors and not just myself. I love a good story, so I'd love to hear other people's stories and what they feel like is out there. Interesting stuff, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. That sounds like a fantastic idea. I mean, opening it up to other authors and getting more stories in the mix is only going to make it richer. And I'm sure folks will have plenty of comments and questions once they dive into the story. So, yeah, let's keep that storytelling circle growing and see where it takes us. I think it'll be a really fun ride.
All right, well, hey, thanks for joining me tonight, and I hope that you enjoyed the star. It's certainly one of my favorite stories to look back on these days. And as I'm looking back at other stories and how I want to present them again, this one was definitely always one that I wanted to do again. It seems to rise every few years in the media that the celebrities tend to have some problems and stuff like that. And I really wanted to write a story that says, hey, you know, there's some of us out there that understand that you're just normal people, and we get it. You're talented, and that's good. And I'm sure that some of them wouldn't really like that connotation, but I think that some of them might appreciate it because they've never really had it. So I always had that kind of fantasy that if famous people hung out with me, that I wouldn't get crazy about it, and I would just try to let them be themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that's such a genuine and down to earth angle to bring to storytelling. It really does humanize those characters, and it's a nice reminder that behind all the glam, people are just people. So it's definitely a cool perspective to share, and who knows? Maybe if a celebrity ever did stumble across it, they'd appreciate that take. In any case, it's been fun chatting through it, and I'm sure we'll have plenty more story to dive into. Thanks for sharing this one.